was watching this round of the PC.
Okay, is everyone ready? All judges? Yes? Jonas? Okay. Part 1 is La Frontera. To live in the borderland means you are mestiza, half-breed, caught in the crossfire, not knowing which side to turn to, run from. It means knowing that the Indian you betrayed for 500 years is no longer speaking to you. That denying the Anglos as bad as having denied the Indian. Cuando vives en La Frontera, people will walk through you. You're a scapegoat, a new race, both women and man, neither a new gender in the borderlands. You are a battleground, you're at home, a stranger. To survive the borderlands, you must live sin fronteras, and the space between cultural clash, also known as the borderland, opens up space for mestiza consciousness. This crazy possibility of bridging dualistic distinctions, which are the root cause of all forms of repression. Dualism remains because the split between the conscious and the subconscious is itself a form of dualism, which normalizes other forms of dualistic distinctions because it allows us to accept those dominant norms as internalized within our subconscious. The borderlands bridges this play and allows us to deconstruct binaries as time. Dignity borderlands make possible the transcend dualistic modes of thinking. The tragedies of oppression are the roots of products of dualism. Binaries are rich to create product social wounds, healing, and false bringing binaries in a realm itself. A product of dualistic separation of conscious and subconscious solidity helps interest the dualistic mestiza conscious breaks down the subject object whether the things are presented the answer between the white and colored male and women license believing the origin is very foundation of the thoughts. Next, preferred non-ideal theory over ideal theory. Ideal theory detached from the real world. A real world is nice and a possibility to understand ethics in the first place. Males, ethics concerned with the ideal, but this one where God is supposed to symbolic can't because the ideal is supposed to be achieved is known. The normative would be attached to the prescriptive. The argument cannot be a matter of definition to be. Ideal theory ignores social realities when turn contradicts normative. Ideals, normative ideals aren't created separately from the social norms that govern us because those influence what we count as an ideal in the first place. Males too. If we start from the ultimate point of ethics, the frame will be deeply antithetical to proper goals of ethics in modern society. We are abstracting away from the reality exclusion to comprehension of actual works and of justice, thereby guarantee that the ideal model will never be achieved. Thus, the role of the past to endorse a mestiza consciousness as a method of liberation over borderland identities. My argument is that this is key to destroy all forms of material oppression by tackling the root cause of the best, not ideal method to engage in mestiza knowledge production and issues of the borderland identity can shape fairness education. The pricing predominance of these identities means that we first have to question the cultural imperateness of our education. For example, risk cultural imperialism that's Salazar and hottest Franquise. By 2050, Latinos will comprise approximately 25% of the U.S. population. The demographic change in mandates educated to accept a stereotypical information quantified the best educated social group who will continue to rapid growth of the education adults and effectively address Latino students' education struggles as they cross the barrier to borders on a daily basis. This means that the both about always fairness education. The 8 points that other voters rely on a different cultural conception of good and bad, respecting borderland identities is a prior question because it embraces the most marginalized cultural identities. The B point is that no particular of other voters rely on a social community that upholds them. However, that falls outside of the value system for those in the borderland because we seek self-identification. So embracing the message of the borderland is key. The alternative cannot guide action because it cannot motivate those in the borderland. The point is that only the both ballot access equal education affairs because its starting point doesn't assume a standard for these issues. Part 2 is that problema, the absence of right over one's border identity uniquely impacts adolescents living in the geographic margins are vulnerable to violence against their linguistic identity because they always have to conform to both culture and society, which means that they can never be themselves all at once as night and night where we come from, where we are journeying to is caught in the borderland. The adolescent will have to grow up with the values that contradict their peers and face of the dilemma of group identity versus alienation. This requirement to find peer groups that they belong will be mentioned. So journey subgroups, however, must not lead to sacrificing one's individual liability and personal. Next is the story of receiving dental treatment as a metaphor for violence done against the borderlands. That's Alhamdulillah. 2, we're going to have to control your tongue. The dentist has cleaned out my roots. I hear the anger rising in the voice. My tongue keeps pushing out the walls of con, pushing back the drills. The long thing leaders and never seen anything so strong as He says, how do you tame a water and train it to be quiet? How do you make it lie down? And Alhamdullah's metaphor for right to a linguistic identity by denying the dentist's legitimacy to deny culture imperialism upon borderland identities. That's Lockhart. The metaphor the dentist establishes the central motive of training a white tongue for the dentist. The tongue is disability why wild tongues can't be tamed. They can only be cut out. The metaphor sets the stage for the importance of linguistic and cultural identity provides critical scrutiny of the borderland society for the following as a metaphor reading of the resolution. Adolescents in the borderland also have a right to autonomous medical choices concerning their tongue. Metaphorical affirmations of borderland identities function as tools that allows to reverse the normalization of imperialism done in the borderlands. That's Eigner. Varo's paradigms represent culture determined roles ability to confer resulting in the social process of mestiza ways in which a paradigms are established through conceptual metaphors because metaphors have the power to restructure the collective unconscious through both linguistic and visual means. Incorporating metaphors engages in a dialectical process in order to transcend and post-conceptual boundaries that have made Octas metaphors in the borderlands such as dominant paradigms transmitted through culture, a culture of psychoanalytic criticism of self and society attempts to change the metaphors that serve destructive limited borders and culture. Also part 3 is la causa linguistic imperialism alienates borderland agency towards adolescents because language is a way of framing oneself because the borderlands the space in between our language is always vulnerable to violence. It can never be itself all at once because it always has to convert to society's demand which causes us to internalize self-hatred towards our identities. This values agency making case of prior question to claims of autonomy. That's Alhamdulillah. 3, I am my language until I can take pride in. I cannot take pride in myself until I am free to write bilingual switch codes without having to always trust I still have to speak English or Spanish when I would rather speak Spanish, as long as I have to accommodate to the English speaker rather than them having to accommodate to me. My tongue will always be legitimate. Additionally, even if I lose the framing further on, any methodology for liberation must constrain by empowering the people in the choice over their liberation. Any other method re-entrenches the problem, since it's a method of manipulation that reduces the oppressed to mere subjects. That's free air. The oppressed must feel that they're fighting for freedom to create. The constructionists requires them to be active, not to say they have been destroyed precisely because their situation has reduced them to two things. To begin the recognition of the matter cannot be the instrument of the liberation. The only effective instrument is dialogue with the oppressed ceases to be religious students because it expresses the consciousness of the students themselves, and giving adolescents in the borderland a right over their linguistic identity is key. The 8 point is that respecting one's linguistic identity is prerequisite to giving the oppressed voice in their method of liberation, because forcing them to convert to another form of identification only starts the liberation process through another form of manipulation. The B point is that the app contains both authors who have experienced what it means to be in the borderland and contains the content that reveals the demand of the youth living in the borderland. The humble nature of the advocacy through its recognition of the need of other perspectives is key to solving for their oppression. The C point is that as someone who embraces that borderland identity, I'm in a unique position to advocate for solvency over my problems, which is the advocacy. The D point is that in the context of education, many adolescents in the borderland have identified the lack of their cultural values as a contribution to their alienation. Integrating these cultures within the educational space empowers those in the borderland by making them the legislators of their liberation. That solves our hardest and front keys. 2. Education should support teaching and setting high expectations for students. Honoring their principal students is also identified as critical for their learning. Latino students interviewed described key experiences in their learning that when the principles were embraced between teacher and student, there was a remarkable impact on the social consciousness and lives within the and beyond the classroom. The job of educators to listen and take seriously these students' voices so that they may bridge the complex set of varied experience of Latinos youth poses through schools, home, language, and community. Also pursues education affairs, not working within the vision of the oppressed ensures violence against a group, which means that your version of education affairs is always going to be skewed. Yes.
Alright. Ready?
Yeah.
Alright. First question, I guess, is what is the mestiza consciousness?
The mestiza consciousness is the idea that we can bridge the subconsciousness and the consciousness and create this new mestiza.
Consciousness in the definition for something that includes consciousness. So
okay, just because I use the word consciousness in the definition doesn't mean I replicate the same meaning.
Well, I'm asking you to define mestiza.
I just literally did. It's the bridge between the subconscious and conscious. Sure, it uses the word conscious, but it's not the same meaning.
Alright, what does that mean to bridge the subconscious and the conscious?
Right, so Azamdullah's argument is that the reason why colonial violence, racism, patriarchy, all of these dualisms exist is because there is a dualistic distinction between our subconscious and consciousness, which allows us to internalize things like patriarchy and so on,
How?
right? What? Well,
Wow.
if society, so yeah, here's an example. So like, let's say there's dominant norms of racism or patriarchy or things like that, right? And so those are within society. The argument is that because we split these two things, then we internalize these things in our subconscious, and because they are in our subconscious and we have internalized that, we cannot take control of our subconscious. We cannot reverse those norms.
What does it mean to be in between for like people who have like, okay, I guess what is a borderland identity?
The borderland is the bridge. It's like the space in between a cultural clash.
So it's the space in between. What does it mean to be in between?
It just means that there are like let's say two cultures, right? And it means that you identify with both cultures, but each culture excludes you, which means that you're stuck in a borderland, in a middle space where you are a stranger at home, but you still cannot identify with tradition because it's not sufficient for your identity.
So the AF says that we should reject you. So the AF would say that dualism is bad, correct?
My argument is that dualism creates systems of oppression.
So dualism creates oppression. All right, that's fine. Then I guess, so you make these T before education arguments. These are contingent on you winning the ideology that, like, this says that we need to respect mestiza and, like, borderland.
Well, first of all, the reasons why T comes first have nothing to do with the mestiza consciousness.
Or, I mean, why the AF comes first, right? Yeah.
Yeah, why the AF comes first before T do not have nothing to do with the mestiza consciousness argument. The Salazar and Hedges Franquis argument is talking about how there's a rising predominance of Latino students in the U.S. population, which...
So why, if like, I do not understand, so does that mean we have to
Right,
find
so the argument
best
is that there's
method?
cultural differences. So that means that what we conceive as engagement, fairness, education is culturally biased. We have to interrogate that, otherwise we risk cultural imperialism.
What if we redirect those things to be targeted towards Latino groups?
What do you mean?
Isn't that what your argument is?
What do you mean?
So if we find different forms of education that better target Latino communities, would that be something that
No. Well, my argument is that the method for what counts as a better form of education for Latino students is depicted by them, right? Specifically the analysis, the last analysis...
You say that we need to use a mestiza consciousness of people who are in between. How can Latinos how do Latinos access the app?
It's a thought process, right? My argument is that... No,
right,
hold on. Do you want me to fully explain?
No prep. The 1 and C is ready.
Okay. Flash.
I'm just literally hitting enter on the flash.
What's it called?
It's called mestiza 1 and C. The order is 3 off case.
I might skip some things on the doc. Maybe the third off doesn't get read. I'll make those things clear. And someone will say slow or clear if they have to, at least, right? Sure. All right. Good.
You said 3?
3. Yeah.
Okay.
I might not read the third though. It's a time constraint issue. Do you have it up, Dino?
Yeah.
All right. Everyone ready? Interpretation: the affirmative must defend granting a legal right to make autonomous medical choices relating to the treatment of diseases and injuries. White defines Merriam Webster's relating to the treatment of diseases and injuries. Autonomous medical decisions are defined by legal regulation, medical sense, that's also the limitation of the principle and subject to debate. Fundamental questions laws restricted placed on autonomous medical choice and when to be included GDT. Others are limited on autonomous healthcare choice and seeking to implement norms on legal plain difference. Question by the extent of the law to intervene violation of the autonomous choice concerning the adolescents. Or injury standards. 1 limits their interpreted limits by permitting a consultation with physician to define anything involving medicine, law plants, smoking, tattoos, and more, which destroys prep impacts. A key to engagement. Next, can't prepare and engage athletes. There is 70, which means only the athletes prepare, make debate, one-sided discussion, engage, make clash, and argument development. Otherwise, debaters will talk past one another and don't develop critical thinking skills. B is ask you after research. There 1 after supposed to case, next after right after unless will be sufficiently better in case specifics and generics and next. Well, how to lose after reading 1 Aaron blocks after research every hour. He's he from like those the fish exposed to research purchase which creates an effort out around piece after always better prepare on the case and allows him to cherry pick medical choice that accept generics hyper specific scenarios no link just add shift unique always ground loss even if for making this a little hard you make the meeting impossible. See research instead of next have to research too many absent they'll stop writing case next and just read generics every round. Key to quality and quantity of educations will have the same repetitive series every round of the ability qualities we won't actually discuss specific the FT topic literature instead of the abstract plans further from the core of the literature sense most authors for us medical choice the abstract and the context of actual jurisdiction. Just to clarify, just because I have really good answers to your aft does not mean that we should disregard norming completely because other people might not, which means that my interpretation should still be used as a norming argument. Second is legalism is good. The construction of a stark binary between legal and extra legal strategies contributes to the apathy of engagement theater. 2 are not mutually exclusive and in fact legal strategies can help reinforce large activist ones that so well. And 7 concerns eliminate the optic of social actions realities and assess similar forms sustained by the law. We explore ways in which the Catholic base social reform some include accountability such as non-discrimination, transparency, and interpreting these avenues understand the law serving significant roles in the quest for more rather than opting out as possible to accept the need to justify activism. Mark. And fairness to the voter because debate is competitive activity that a fairly playing field the judges know way to determine the better opponent that does so we do around voter education since debate is valuable for the education benefits of receiving the activity school teachers students to support education core value. Voter jurisdiction is outside of the judge jurisdiction on a non-topic absence half and dead be from the topic that means you vote negative when my counter interprets the correct interpret the topic even the absence or interpret beneficial that also means he always here and any other impact drop the bear one drop the reason equivalent to severances allowed shift to different debate than 1 year that's independently bad makes all of previous office rebel second equals punishment's greatest greatest 7 win dropping the emails away judge for peace of actress still instead of them to run it abuse of time circuit case and found out drop the argument never solves and competing interpretation. 1 reason really makes no sense that you cannot be reasonable topic all of you are. Second reason is arbitrary. We don't know what is reasonable in judge intervention to random justified thresholds. No RVIs. 1 seems already operated when the office topic does mean you should automatically win that model of debate logically grant auto with the office time. Second force is 3 RVIs where everything debate to ignore substance both to be generate office on the so that's not only exposed time to officer choice substance education by ignoring substance. The critique. Their centering of the mixed mestiza subject maintains white supremacy to say celebration and erasure of anti-black genocide. You want to see neutralizes water downs and unflinching paradigmatic analysis of anti-blackness. The starting point of violence against colonized people. That's Allen. Little Latin American development defines African culture backwards Western European culture, the height of civilization, process of transculturization, history says the loss of culture, the adoption of new culture that's born in contact with the others, the recasting of the mestiza, seeking as it is not the production and maintenance of whiteness reserves culture, masculine white discourse half often the effective societizing or aligning these violent histories of conflict between Europeans and natives and Europeans and Native Americans throughout history are concerned. Is here very real violence, conquest, and colonization. We really point that Western people produce hegemonic power and knowledge without acknowledgement, continuing facts, the particular band of a journey does not constitute so much theory. The celebration of mestiza is the celebration of black genocide and anti-blackness must be the starting point of any analysis of racial oppression. Their focus on the fluidity of identity, the flexibility of mestiza identity operations, the flexible and fluid nature of whiteness to adapt to change the structural foundation of the anti-blackness, the coalitional nature of the permutation, dilutes and aggressive critique of the white anti-black tendencies at Copeland and Section 03 racial theory does not seek to take leaves over the other average matters. So the restriction of white supremacy, the threshold, radical multiracial, the organization of life is coalition. We are told the variety of tones and tenors that race matters no longer simply black and white. Votive dichotomous views rendered excluding the discussion of the colors in the middle. We just say move beyond black and white. Well, a lot of people saying we can get out of that paradigm because those black people made me feel so uncomfortable. I know a lot about the blacks, but I didn't really know anything about Asians. So I think I don't have to take those things about people and seriously anymore. Although there are people who function as the blacks, in particular, there is a group of people who function as the black. Elsewhere, they are called in non-archaic language Negroes. Negroes, the blacks of every the black of the blacks, black is blacks. Black is function of the primary racial. Signifies the only standards in the room. And the recent fight out the historical specificity. The blackness is the point from which the greatest distance must be forgoed. Next critique: granting adolescents borderland the ability to make concepts of medical choices, generates descriptions of the rational autonomous subject to the naturalized, just ability and inferiority, politicization of rights society with the elimination of demon corporeality, understanding productivity, organized bodies for maximum utility. That's first 15. Just abilities by electromagnetic pact with bodies, ability present to fact of recurring courage and that. making some bodies the normative with the body of vast creates neutral identity, the awesome spatial subject, finds people with disabilities unworthy, one naturalized disabilities inferior, measures of esteem that disabilities ontological, pragmatic, method, the condemnation of life, and this classroom setting where we discuss different corpus not constitute our distinct, the ontological position, disability search for a complete body function where side resists a particular race, sex, gender, alien, deceiving corporeality, and root cause of exclusion, 90% to certain kinds of bodies of greater civil rights and others matter, German the membership of the body part of the 5 the battle down, and the set of the chambers powerful with the class we opposites excited today, not political prompt direct but focus on the offensive performance gestures that feels of pleasure, disgust, political, separately political feelings, disabilities, not just one contributing other disabilities, key concept of which major controversies are presented in the public sphere, all alternative should reject the first push politics in favor of dismodern identity politics never surrounded in when chat perceptual only just modern understanding identity self associating the crazy racism sexism class and evil semi permutation opposites moderns and through revival the white norm starts as safest their theoretical warranty but the disability we should apply that quality and to be created moderns approach would characterize limitation the identity group audible exclusivity disability presents with the ballot the empty body case advocating mestiza consciousness is complicit within a logic of genocidal appropriation of native peoples that Smith and 10 substantial post-colonial thought ironically rest in the continued colonization of indigenous people and Zawalda's borderlands situates Indians and Europeans in a dichotomy that can be healed through the mestiza and Zawalda piece Indian cultures having no challenge for deviance a problem that can be healed by the challenge of ambiguity that the mixed race necessarily possess less original and ambiguous and ambiguous juxtaposed and unfavorable with the mestiza can hold concepts ideas rigid barriers native identities build to a primitive past native peoples are trapped in logical genocide appropriation the whole logical that indigenous peoples must disappear they must always be disappearing people allowed non-indigenous people's right claim over the land though this logic of genocide non-native people then become the rightful inheritors what was indigenous the appropriation of native identity by even people of color observable can be easily distinguished from the logic of genocide whereby native also to the post pottery such must live this logical policy as well as work of juxtapose the complicated queer mestiza subject with the primitive stability subject to the critique do not ideological and the history of native peoples the indigenous subjects once again if it's a framing issue for all of your preempts that he has to explain why the criticism response by intro or not nor is a general language obviously ethics exists and fairness exists otherwise there was no abuse for the just because the interpret in English does not mean it is not accessible to those in the borderlands you have to explain why my interpret stereotyping of their culture don't do the work for him because it doesn't exist one he has to explain why rights one relate to Latin because Latinos because the immigrants are protesting for rights that is a relevant consideration which means our de-interprets better form of education immigrants who are protesting in the streets for more work hours and better pay are definitely an issue in which you have protests but you need a legal remedy for those things which means that our interpretation is a better form of Latin consciousness second the piece of point is false because it seems a communitarian view of norms rather than cosmopolitanism one the idea that fairness would become from citizenship is not with the negative beliefs that fairness is not just contingent on one nationality the speaks to that third the after world about says that borderline identities are important does not mean that she goes way you say your world about does not predefine standards but we still argue that legal rights are the best way to discuss borderline identities which means that your discussion controls the internal world about skip the number 4 next on free our critical pedagogy assumes personality and special validity this results in totality and commodification of concepts growth 90 and critical understanding power knowledge relation draws some deep certainty colonization process suitable not for the natural of critical pedagogy these is readjustment the terroristic element of critical pedagogy and education in alliance with the national system pressure liberty third countries and attempts to expropriation knowledge for rest of identities specializing ability to save it sure not theory well within pedagogy theory supposed to form dynamics and logical virality mark and cater is the case to reinstate the violence of hegemonic finds reasonable to marginalize knowledge should be for herself and understand that's enough to the consideration by the flux of subject especially the undeclared anti-intellectual laxism glorification of self-evident knowledge of the other critical pedagogy to overcome the foundation of the UN of emancipatory ethic like the knowledge of the Brazilian farmers represents legitimate relevant knowledge and contracts with representation with hegemonic conspiracy the representation knowledge is relevant to legitimate and superior and hegemonic education and I guess finish the card within critical theory supposed to time for the dynamics and logic reality. Alright, that's fine.
Okay, ready?
Yeah.
So,
do you want me to delete what I didn't read
yes,
first?
Please.
Yeah, no problem.
Finish this card and then got to reality. No, validity. No, reality. Did not read number 1. That's it. Alright, ready?
Yeah.
Status of the alternatives.
Both of them are conditional.
Okay, so let's talk about the second alternative.
Mm-hmm.
So, what does the alternative do?
Dismodernism?
Yes.
Sure. So dismodernism was
Wait, who does dismodernism solve for?
Right. It literally would probably solve for the entirety of the app.
So it solves for the people in the borderland?
We argue that it does because the idea is that in a world
so,
of dismodernism, we recognize we
fine.
recognize it's not just the borderland, right? Our alternative is more holistic than that. In the world of the alternative, we recognize disability as something as positive rather than something that should be viewed as negative. For example, the 1AC takes the metaphor of cutting off the tongue.
So do you have evidence that those in the community of the disability want to endorse the alternative?
The Davis evidence is pretty good on this issue about how...
What does Davis conduct like a study on adolescent students?
No,
or something?
well, right. I don't think there is a study of people
Then-
with disabilities.
then
Our
why
argument
should
is that, right, and also I think the alternative would fight this ideology that it's like there are people with disabilities and people with not, right? Our alternative is a criticism of that we should recognize that everyone has disabilities.
Let's talk about topicality.
Sure.
So the first
the legalism good arguments, what is the terminal impact of that?
Sure. So we have better. So the legalism good arguments talk about how it is a better approach. So in terms of social approach, it's a better approach to social activism, because when I even give the example of immigrant workers who are asking for better pay, they are not just social activists, but they ask for legal remedies to their problems.
Where's this example?
I mean, that is like immigrant workers like on the streets of Los Angeles that I see every day asking for better work. Like, that is empirically proven. I read my newspaper and it's like people want more pay. The living wage.
So,
it was
so
a topic.
The terminal impact of legalism is a better method to solve the gap.
Well, it's not just better. It's not just a better method to solve the gap, but also I think the engagement argument is pretty good here.
Okay,
but
that's
also
fine.
It is consistent with
let's
the
talk
topic.
about the let's talk about the Freire argument. The second argument, you say Kate turns case. What is this argument?
Sure. So the argument is pretty good about how the Gurdjieff evidence talks about how you reinstate the violence of hegemonic education because you presume that marginalized knowledge should be preferred on a self-evident basis. So this once again takes into these certain perspectives of people.
Wait, what?
No,
what
the evidence.
Do I presume?
Sure. So the argument is that critical pedagogy would claim
where
that.
Does the 1AC defend critical pedagogy in the first place? Do I even say critical
pedagogy?
This is
a specific indictment of Freire.
Really? Where does it say Freire? Because critical pedagogy has to do with Giraud. And
Freire.
Even your card analysis is even indicting Giraud specifically.
Freire literally is an advocate for.
Well, first of all, Freire
pedagogy.
Was pedagogy of the oppressed, and then Giraud reinterpreted to critical pedagogy.
This argument would still matter because
how does it matter for Freire?
Well, sure, right? Because the argument is that you literally say that we have to look at the knowledge of the oppressed.
Why is that bad?
To answer that ideology, because the argument is that it would result in totalitarianism and violence.
How?
Because
wait. So you're saying we should look
the card
at
is
the
very
oppressor's
specific.
knowledge,
No, it's not that we should look at the oppressor's knowledge.
Whose knowledge.
The argument is that it
do we
is just
look?
as important as the knowledge of the oppressed in terms of having a better understanding of the situation.
Okay.
It's not that only one person's knowledge matters.
Okay. Starting now. stop. So we're just gonna be starting with the Fourier analysis, and
Bob's
then.
not here.
Oh,
How's school, Dino?
sorry. Stressful.
All right. Stop. He was at. I have him at. What do you have? I have 32.
Same.
All right.
So, order is going to start with the Fourier analysis. Then it's going to go to, we're going to go to the T-shell. Then it's going to be with the counter interp, his interp. Then it's going to be the anti-blackness K. And then it's going to be a case. Actually, let me take prep again. Start it. Okay, stop. Okay, same order. Okay, is everyone ready?
Are you reading new stuff?
I'm reading cards, yeah.
Did you flash it?
Okay, hold on. Let me see. Okay. Let's call it linear octos.
All right. Sorry. Oh, that's the 1AC. My bad. What is it? 1 AR. Oh, date modified. There it is. My bad. Alright. Oh, thanks for giving me the analytics. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Alright.
Can you just stand?
Yeah. Sorry. Okay. Oh, you can lower it too. Yes.
I was gonna see if I could, but it's too high for me.
That's fine. It'll be fine.
Okay. Is everyone? Hold on, let me get my. What do we do?
Oh. Can you merge the text? Alright, I am good.
Okay.
Order.
So it's gonna start with the Fourier analysis, then it's gonna go to T, then it's gonna go to the K is on the same order. All right. Is everyone ready? Extend Fourier any method to resist structural violence must come with dialogue with the oppressed, otherwise it's a method of manipulation group. His first two arguments say just critique critical pedagogy. First note link that linguistic does not defend critical pedagogy, rather that we should associate with the oppressed. The second argument his card literally does not even talk about empowering the oppressed and how that reproduces forms of oppression. The third argument is that it is inevitable. We still have to adopt the viewpoint of someone, either the oppressor or the oppressed, which means that the question of what method is what method is better. My argument is that if you start from the standpoint of the oppressor, the oppressor is always going to reproduce violence. The fourth argument is that if we use both, it'll always be co-opted because the oppressor is in a position of domination. The fifth argument, is that you can use the F as a starting point. My argument is that we cannot engage with the oppressor, rather that the oppressor, when we engage with them, they have to start with the assumption that our voices matter in the first place. The sixth argument is that you have still conceded the ignore the Salazar-Harris and Frankie's two analysis, which outweighs your arguments on specificity because it talks about it in the context of education. Adolescents in the borderland have identified a lack of cultural values as a contribution to their alienation, which means that the way we solve for these people is by empowering them in the first place. Empirically, the students have said that when they feel disempowered by disrespecting the borderline identity, that is what causes their alienation in the first place. Means that it outweighs on specificity of your arguments, because even if culture was genetically oppressive. It's not in this context. Then on theory, counter-interpretation, right, to a linguistic identity should be metaphorically be understood as a medical choice. That's as in dual metaphor from the one you see reason to prefer first is reason to prefers the freer analysis cross-apply. Freer methodologies to resist oppression must come through dialogue with the oppressed, because any other method reduces the oppressed to mere such as the oppressed one. Metaphors I want metaphors, and the case present metaphors are key to linguistic identity. That's the ignorant and vital to analysis, which you 100% conceded. So as long as I win the and also under the go back to the freer, the solitary Frankies, you conceded the implication of the that this always education and fairness not working with the vision of the oppressed ensures violence against a group, which means that your vision of education and fairness is already skewed. Your framing argument only responds to the mestiza conscious arguments that they certainly do not respond to. This was 100% conceded. Your which means that I am winning the theory debate. I would then go to his the Wilderson, the anti-blackness stuff. Case solves your impacts. You can see the time data analysis that black violence exists because the structure of recognition is anti-black, but the affirmative allows us to reverse this by breaking down dualism between white and black through reversing the norms within our subconscious that allow anti-blackness to manifest. Then on their alternative, if the structure of recognition is anti-black, then the alternative radical form of resistance has no solvency. That's Wilderson. People are not radical. They're moving against the system. People try to live 50 years. People want to be recognized. When we understand recognition is anti-black, then we don't pick up a gun and move against the system. We try to find ways to be recognized, even though that is impossible. Also turns your critique first as methodologies to resist structural violence must come through the oppressed themselves, which your alternative has not isolated as to why all the oppressed want this alternative, but only the affirmative has, which means that is a major dissent to your performance. And on the ableism critique, overview to both critiques, the time data analysis solves all of your impacts because you conceded that it controls internally to all root cause forms of dualism, which means it solves all the K impacts, but also permutation to both the absent and mestiza consciousness means that your arguments which means that the alternative will always be co-opted absent of the affirmative, but also your alternative does not take into account the view of the oppressed. And finally on the mestiza, then on the turn-on case, you say mestiza excludes indigenous, but no, it doesn't, because that is the argument that there's a binary between indigenous and Europe, that the borderland is between that, which means that the affirmative literally straight turns all of your argument because it indicates that is what causes oppression in the first place, and that is oppressive. We should look at the borderline in between, but second, no, it doesn't, because it respects those other identities, but it's not a question of whether those identities are disrespected, rather how those identities formulate disrespect the borderlands in the first place, means that a case wins in that layer, which means that you consider the fair analysis and the time data analysis. That's going to take out the entirety of your critiques, because it means that you have to start from the standpoint of the oppressed, or that the affirmative solves all of the entirety of the impacts, because you consider that it's a root cause of oppression.
Alright, before I start prep, I want you to delete everything off the doc you didn't read. Here. Yeah. Here, I can make it, I'll make it small. Here. Yeah, so you can...
I made other arguments, analytic arguments, not here on the prep.
Obviously, it's fine. Yeah. You don't have to type this out.
Just don't delete them. Just delete the stuff you didn't read.
But then I already.
That's fine. Just highlight it.
Wait, do that. Can you do it?
So just what cards?
Do it.
Press up, sorry.
Sorry, y'all.
No, it's fine. You only read Wilderson one.
Yeah.
And you read this second.
I said case rules. Oh, yeah, I read that. That's fine.
Alright. Alright, so your counterinterp, 4 minutes, yeah. So your counterinterp is that metaphor, like medical choices as a metaphor is okay?
My argument is that a right to linguistic identity should metaphorically be understood as a medical choice.
What is your reason to prefer?
The free air analysis.
Just free air?
Yeah, which I made 6 arguments.
So
as to
methodologies to resist oppression must come in dialogue with the oppressed?
Right, so if I win that argument from case, it proves that metaphors, you can see the ignorant virus analysis indicates that metaphors is the method that the oppressed want, which means that I can leverage that against
So
critique.
metaphors linguistically should be, like medical metaphors should be allowed.
You conceded that metaphors and the way metaphors is specifically the way the borderline identities solve for their arguments. If I win free air, that is the methodology for oppression.
How?
What?
Why does like the metaphor of identity
No. My argument is that free air filters out all of the impacts as to first the top layer is that if I win free air, the 6 arguments I made, that means that I win the education level because you conceded the implication in terms of the pre-fiat. So if I have a link into free air, that's the reason as to why I win the theory debate. The reason I'm winning the theory debate is because you conceded the ignorant virus analysis from the 1AC indicates that metaphor specifically is what the oppressed want in terms of their form of liberation. It means that is a disattaching interpretation because you obviously exclude metaphorical interpretations.
That's fine. Did you say you lead at all? No lead arguments, right? All right. Did you perm either of the alternatives?
Yeah, I said permutation. I just made an overview. I said permutation do both. You can see the temp deviant analysis indicates that we have to, dualisms are the root cause of all oppression. Even your arguments that are like, oh, this is the root cause. The only reason why that is a root cause is because there's a distinction between, like, let's say black and white.
That's fine.
So the argument is that
Thank
your
you.
alternative will be co-opted out of
Thank
the
you.
permutation.
Thank you. All right. Did you make any link turn to anti-blackness or no link argument?
I made,
The tam dignity controls the internal link. Did you make a no link argument? Yes or no?
No.
Did you make a link turn argument? Yes or no?
No.
All right.
I just said case solves permutation.
That's fine.
I made a turn, yeah.
What was the turn?
The free air turn.
What was the freer turn? On
That the
anti-blackness?
alternative doesn't engage with the oppressed.
Alright, that's fine. Alright. And that sucks. Oh.
Flashing new stuff.
No. It's just analytics. Oh yeah, actually I'll flash the analytics. But my prep's over. It's literally it's all together, Bob. It's gonna take a second. Save as it's mestiza 2N. Oh, there's actually there's one card up here. Mestiza 2NC. Alright, the order will be
Mestiza 2.
2NC, yeah.
Okay.
It'll be ableism, then ableism, then the ableism, the case, or actually the order of the doc is topicality with so ableism, topicality, anti-blackness, then case. Oh yeah, this is weird. I feel like I'm using 100 rings. Mestiza 2NC. Oh, it's 2NR. But yeah, it yeah, it is. Should be. Tell me if you don't see it. I'll flash it.
I got it.
Okay, awesome. All right. Everyone ready? Okay.
Should have read 1AR theory because I'm smacking on substance. First go to ableism. You've considered the link which says the autonomous the metaphor of constructing the autonomous body is uniquely bad because it's always going to be inaccessible to the disabled body. That is how when you use rhetoric of autonomy, that creates a metaphor of the able body because the autonomous subject is always going to be independent from something else. The disabled body can never be independent because they are always dependent on something else. Your entirety of the one you see is that metaphors are key to solving. And my argument is that there's a disadvantageous and negative from one metaphor to voting affirmative. It's a dropped link to the affirmative. That is going to be sufficient. That means that's it is disadded to the permutation, but also you have conceded the Seeber's evidence which says that ableism is the root cause of all oppression because it's the idea that we can demarcate certain bodies as being different. That is the idea of people living in the border or people being Hispanic is something that is disabling them and that forces them to be excluded from society. You can extend the alternative. That is Davis, that we should look into the world of dismodernism. No disadded the alternative. Literally, you've done no work on the ableism case, which means you should not do work for him in the two areas. You're going to try to explode about why case solves ableism, but do not let us do this. Your arguments were about race. No, even work was being done about ableism, and especially you should prefer Seeber's because of its root cause analysis already made about how it uniquely distinguishes because of the demarcation of color, which means that you can extend the alternatives in which we should embrace this world of postmodernism in which all people are viewed as having a positive disability. You conceded that that's false because a world where we did that we would never discriminate against certain people. You said perm do both solves, but this is not nearly enough work because obviously the metaphor of the aff is disadvantageous to the permutation. It's a conceded link, which is a disadd. He has made no reason why the permutation would resolve that link. Do not give it to him. Giving adolescents an autonomous choice still exists in the world of the aff. No link argument was made. That's a disadd. Topicality. Topical version of the aff and aff that critiques the notion of the border and extends the right to adolescent medical autonomy independent of nationality, could even be global, doesn't have to be in the United States. Second topical version of the aff are abstinence, only sex education aff that Chris Reddit voices, talks about how the federal government targets Latin communities because they see them in need of moralizing. They withhold funding for sex education programs, not about the aff necessarily, but it's about Latin identity normalizing and education. My interpret includes reproductive health. If you have read abortions, I would not have read this argument. Actually, on the line by line, your first argument is about how your counter-interpretation, how it should be about a metaphor that can linguistically do both. The topical version of the aff would mean you can still have metaphors and still critique these different identities. You just have to extend a legal right. You've considered the specificity argument about how Latin American communities can uniquely still have things because of protests or immigrants protesting for different rights means that there is a topical version of the affirmative. You can still include voters. For example, the protesters can use metaphors but still want a legal remedy. You've conceded at that point there is no solvency for the app, even so you conceded pretty much the entirety of the free air. You talked about the free air card, which means that that is sufficient. But first of all, off of free air. He doesn't solve this. Freer, this is on Topicality. Freer does not solve because he believes in critical pedagogy and dialogue. If we win or limits arguments, improves this model, debate shuts down. Dialogue because the negative should never be prepared. Second, because negative would never be prepared. Second, their evidence proves the oppressed don't mean mestiza consciousness for liberation. What they do need is an understanding of their own oppression. Oppression they constituted by legal structures in the law only are T argument access to those distinctions because it means that we are better prepared. You can extend the entirety of the T argument, which was fairly much conceded. You can extend the interpretation is that you have to defend autonomous choice. Consider the adolescent time is not a legal issue nor related to treatment of disease or injury. Guess what? Under our interpretation, you aren't even medical, which means you don't meet your counter interpretation because you conceded that medical is to treat illness and injury, and you've not said why cutting off the tongue is uniquely meaning that, which means you don't meet your counter interpretation. Game over. Like, you could have, like, your argument is you should be able to have a medical metaphor, but you don't even meet the definition of medical, which means you don't meet your metaphor. Extend competing interpretations. Reasonably arbitrary and vice judge intervention. Drop the debate or drop the argument is insufficient, which means that you automatically lose on the T debate because you don't meet your counter interp. But even so, extend the limit standard because your limit undergirds any concentration with physicists or anything involving medicine. You can see this is key to engagement because I can't prepare and engage after there's so many, which means that only the after prepared. You can see that limits my engagement, which I cannot engage with the mestiza consciousness because I am never prepared to debate your affirmative. You also conceded that even if I'm prepared, there is still a norming argument, which means that if other people would not be able to prepare your after, that decreases critical pedagogy and critical education. Because Freer wants us to discuss different things. Freer wants us to have a critical discussion, but I cannot do that if I'm not prepared to debate your after. That argument was conceded. You have also conceded that the law is good. That is low bell. Statement about how we structure the stark binary between legal and extra-legal strategies contribute to the apathy of engagement with that we can never engage things, which means that we always conflate a distinction between social activism and legal solutions, which is always going to be a disadvantage to your interpretation. But also you literally have like two answers against the T argument, which means you should be very, very lenient doing work for him. But you can extend no RVIs because that chills legitimate theory. Next on anti-blackness. First, Malcolm X characterized our argument perfectly with the following quote. It's just like when you've got some coffee that's too black, which means it's too strong. What do? You integrate with cream. You make it weak. But if you pour too much cream in it, you won't even know you ever had coffee. It used to be hot. It becomes cold. It used to be strong. It becomes weak. It used to wake you up. Now it puts you to sleep. Thus, the historical centering of the mestiza consciousness has been the core of the production of hierarchies among individuals, communities grounded in anti-black rationale. The mestizas were always the wealthier, more powerful groups of people because they were descendants of white European colonists. Embracing mestiza consciousness is a way to create a more palatable ethnic identity for the white consumer audience, distance from the blackness that should be at the center of analysis on our race. If we are right, we have impact returning that the starting point there means that for defining coloniality only reiterates the systems of anti-blackness are at the root of the part that we are trying to solve off the permutation. The copying link extended to the top of the flow disproves the permutation. The affirmative accentuates anti-blackness by occupying the start point of the mestiza consciousness. Our strategy are mutually exclusive. Here are some more ideas to the permutation. First, the co-option is centering. Mestiza consciousness still the strategy center. Whiteness, the black-white spectrum, and Hispanic communities, especially in the context of black and white. Mexican to prove that mestiza originates from a historically privileged position and is linked to the same epistemic frame of the colonizer. That is sufficient here, but also go to your arguments. First of all, you read Wilderson. This is not a burn it down alternative, which means you can literally get rid of this argument. Our arguments we need an unflinching paradigmatic analysis of things that you have conceded that solves the entirety of the act because it's the better form of repression. Because you tried. All right, here it's very simple. You say control and tone ring and root cause, and they all get co-opted. No, it doesn't. Your aff is still another form of analyzing things. We provide an alternative to that. You're not doing any work about how the permutation would actually resolve links because it doesn't. Our alternative is that you taint it. You are so scared about being tainted with whiteness, then you reject it. Next, go over to Smith on the case. Our Smith evidence is specific to the book. They continue with slight ands, Wald's Borderlands. It indicates that positioning of the hybrid subject assumes everyone is starting to a post-colonial relationship. The assumption is not true in the context of Native American steel. Their lands colonized ands, Wald's framing the indigenous culture as having no toleration for deviance in their right and need a postmodern mestizo that has tolerance to the non-native social procedure occupies the indigenous former intellectual space. Thus here from the rest on the continued colonization of indigenous peoples. Quickly on Ferrer. Here's the framing issue. You have conceded that topicality is not just an issue of fairness in education, but that this is our methodology for fighting mestiza oppression, which means that our interpretation is not just an issue about you being more fair and educational, but you've conceded that it is a better way to resolve mestiza oppression because granting legal rights to the mestiza is key, which means don't let him extend Freire. This comes before you win the theory debate because our method is better, and that would be consistent with Freire.
Okay, so starting on that last argument he made, then Freire, then T, then the K's on the order.
Oh yeah, it's down. Okay. Sorry about that.
It's fine.
Okay. Is everyone ready?
Yep.
Your last argument is that topicality is a method of fighting oppression. This presupposes how a method of fighting oppression and how we do that. The one is he has this answer, right? That is engagement with the oppressed. Engagement with the oppressed is the way we solve for it. If I win any of the 6 arguments that you conceded, it's the reason as to why the best method for the oppressed has to be engagement, which is going to take out all your T arguments. If I win that, I have a link to extend the 6th argument that I made. That was specifically the last card, the in hardest case analysis, which is how we sound specificity in the context of borderline identities. We should empower the oppressed in their method of liberation because it's the only thing that allows them to feel empowered. Otherwise, empirical studies prove that they feel disempowered when they are not giving a voice to the oppressed. Means that if I and also you consider the ignorant rebuttals analysis indicates that the way we empower the oppressed is through metaphorical affirmations. If I win your T interpretation excludes metaphors from the affirmative, it's a game over issue because the oppressed are demanding it, and your only argument is not responsive to the internally superior, which is that we have to listen to the oppressed. Means that it takes out all of your T arguments. So then, let's go to a topical version of the app. You say topical version of the app is a critique the notions of the borderline extend the rights to adolescents. This is not the topical version of the app because the only thing that could be a topical version of the app is what the oppressed demand, and you want to see contextualized is that what the oppressed demand is a metaphorical interpretation. Means that this does not solve your second argument. Your second topical version of the app also does not solve because it is not a metaphorical interpretation of the resolution and the advocacy that we defend. If as long as I control for your eye, control what topical version of the app means because you have not provided that the oppressed want this as the topical version of the app. Then you say that protesters can use metaphors and then do legalism. That is also not the topical version of the app because the topical version of the app would have had to do with the advocacy of the one issue which has extended throughout the debate. Then on the Freire analysis, you make some terms, but these are not applicable. Overview arguments. The Freire filters out these terms because it indicates what engagement means in the first is how we should engage, how we should engage, which I am the only one that has dialogue with the oppressed. The second argument, second argument, I definitely have a link to the Freire analysis because you can see the ignorant virus means that it's the only way we can solve for it. Now, go on the critiques. Here's where you really messed up. You conceded the cross application on Freire on both of the critiques, which means that it's a disadvantage to your alternative IU, both of your alternatives do not engage with the oppressed free controls the internally into all your methods of liberation, which all your methods of liberation, which you have 100% conceded means that the role of the alternative only creates another method of oppression that replicates the system. But you also conceded the Tamgadian analysis from the 1AC, which indicates that dualisms are the root cause of all forms of repression. The reason why there's anti-blackness in the first place is because there's a distinction between black and white. Your root cause arguments presuppose the dualistic distinction means that a case solves 100% of the permutation to both was not just a regular permutation, rather that the alternative world still keeps dualistic distinctions, means that means that even if your alternative does solve in this instance, it will always be co-opted because the world of the alternative still keeps dualistic distinctions, which only the affirmative solves. So here's how that goes. You conceded Tamgadian solved all the alternative, but also the most important argument that Freire takes it out. I'm winning Freire in the 1AC because you made a damning concession, which means that allows me to control what the T debate looks like in forms of engagement. And you also conceded that this form of education outweighs, because this form of education outweighs under the Salazar and Hunkies analysis. Otherwise, the form of education and jurisdiction and fairness we get is always going to be skewed.
Good round.
Good round. Does anybody need to see any cards before I step out?
Can you do that for keys thing?
Yeah.
No.
Anyone else?
Yes. Give me a minute.
Okay. Can I flash it to you? So Mr. Timmons can also have.
Just use an email as well.
Yeah.
Need stuff from me, Steve.
Not yet.
You can see Salazar as well, Dino.
Okay, so the last card, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I see Smith.
Yeah. Smith, right, Mr. Timmons? Right.
Yeah.
What's your email, Steve?
It's Sknell at hw.com.
How do you spell that?
SKNELL at hw.
SKNELL.
Yeah. First initial, last name at hw.
At where?
hw.com.
HW.
You don't need anything.
Okay, I sent it to you in an email. And here's cards.
words specifically, or just a lot?
I'll flash it to you. Oh, it's in here. When I see Ross's nose.
Did you write out the text in the counter interpretation, or was it extended?
Oh, I wrote it out. I can see it.
Sorry, there's so many documents here.
I know. No, no problem. Just need to read it real quick.
one on disclosure theory. Out of 2 went on.
Figured you'd appreciate the irony of that.
Yeah. Somewhat of a performative contradiction, I would say.
We discuss.
Yeah, you do know.
For
You've
several
learned,
years.
You've learned.
Several years.
What's up?
No, I see what's happening.
Never let it be said that Kid Chris can't grow and admit he's wrong.
Can we write that down? Put that on video.
Well, I think it's not fair.
Your parent?
I can't get access to the wiki and they won't respond to my request.
No one really cares about the cartoon.
True.
Oh, thank you.
Although
It's
they
all
get
about
your
style.
devices as a result of not being able to edit it.
Oh, well, sorry, I mean, I was not taking notes. I thought there was people.
Okay, so back to full. Steve, Bob, you want some water? I'm gonna grab some real quick.
Nice.
Alright.
Well, yeah, okay.
I got you.
Give me water.
Big old water bottle.
Okay.
Right,
You need to get some water? Oh, we're about to get some.
thanks. And Jonas, of course.
Shit, this days are over, cuz.
You're on the straight fit because we're out here.
No, I'm going to sit down with you.
Okay. I'm gonna we can sit down and do a place to do that. On that, I think you can still do that based on the way I was Chris, when do you leave?
5:40.
Does not.
Is that y'all's flight? Whatever.
Okay. So you're gonna put the one? I'm a little later than that. I'm gonna wish you with 5:40.
You're gonna end up getting home at like 2 or 1.
Us? Nah, we get home at 5:45 or 5:48.
So on days like that, do you go to work the next day?
Straight like that. Most times.
Are y'all on a red eye?
Yeah. I normally don't do that, but the price is so different.
Sometimes it can be.
I'm gonna slip anyway.
This weekend too, all of the, even the LA Vegas flights were very expensive. It's normally you can get a ticket for like $120, and this weekend it was not that.
I did.
This is the last one.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I don't know. It was the only thing where I could find. It's awesome.
Definitely sell long paper pretty much every office.
That's bigger. That's bigger than legal paper, though.
That's 11 by 17.
Yeah.
Alright, everybody. Everyone here? Steve, Mr. Timmons. The decision is a 2
2-1 for the negative from Peninsula. Alright, so I voted aff. I'm first looking at T, and I really thought that I was going to vote neg, because, I mean, Dino, you are really spread thin in this debate and just do not have a lot of offense. Your only hope is this argument that the case is a DA to T, and I take it that the extension of free air is good enough that the aff has an impact. T doesn't really have an impact unless it impacts to the aff, but all this engagement kind of stuff and law of good arguments don't impact back to free air. You have not said why this kind of engagement of me in this debate is important to solving the aff, and you would have to show that it's important for you to be able to engage, to access the impact of doing what the oppressed want, and that's not something that is explained in the 2 and R. There are these topical versions of the aff arguments that are in the 2 and R, and that I think is the best place the negative could win, because that would answer the case of the DA to T. But I don't think you end up winning this because the aff says that it's not just the idea of having metaphors, but it's doing exactly what they want. So you can't say, oh, we had metaphors, so we met what they want, and we're going to do all this other stuff. You have to do exactly what it is, and that is not explained a ton, and I wish there were a lot more debate on this. What does it mean to do what the oppressed want? Does that mean that we have to have metaphors and can do other things, or can we only use metaphors exclusively? And I'm using shorthands here. Obviously, the aff talks about the importance of mestiza consciousness, the cultural process in which we can criticize self and society through metaphors, and that's an important part of the aff. But does sex education do that? Does protest for living wage do that? I don't know. And all the 2 and R says is, well, we could have metaphors and still talk about the borderlands identity, and that just doesn't really answer the aff. You have to prove that there could be the aff advocacy text and also have a legal right, and obviously that's not true when you don't have a piece of evidence that says that adolescents in the borderlands want to have a legal right. And so this is the framing I get. I think the aff squarely puts the burden on the neg to prove that there is a topical version of the aff within the framing of free air, and I don't think you have that. That's T. Now on ableism, I think that you go for too much in this debate, and it really hurts you. The aff really only has 1 or 2 arguments, but you're not really answering those 1 or 2 arguments. So he's made the claim that borderlands is a root cause of all different oppressions relating to identity, because there is we create borders between 2 things. There's dualism between able-bodied, disabled body, and that seems to be something that the alternative could solve for, sure. And I think your explanation of the alternative is good in the 2 and R, and I think you get a lot of your alternative offense for solving disability, but I don't think that you win solving for all different types of oppression because of the extension of free air. You don't really go for any of the answers you put on free air or any of the Kurzweil stuff in the 2 and R, so I give the aff a lot of access to the importance of looking at a dialogue with the oppressed for solving these impacts. So I think that's important not just for solving the aff, but also for solving ableism. And so that's a DA to the alternative. Now my question is, given the concession of the link, is the aff, is that link make aff solvency worse, or does the free air cross out to the alt make solvency for the neg worse? And I'm thinking that the aff is farther ahead on this, and I can understand that argument a lot better. The explanation of why the aff links, they have a metaphor of autonomy, is not really good in the 2 and R. I don't know, you haven't pointed to any lines in the aff, any cards in the aff, nothing. I mean, the link work is really shoddy. Granted, yes, there isn't debate on it from the aff, but when I compare that to free air says your alt won't solve, which is also conceded, I understand the free air argument a lot better, and I think it applies to your argument. This was played out in cross-ex. You don't explain how your alternative is motivated by people who are oppressed by ableism. Sure. So I think the aff solves the majority of this impact and better than the alternative, and I think something very similar on the anti-blackness flow. I think your links in the 2 and R are also fairly poor. Like, you go for this coffee argument that it's just a distraction argument that we can't talk about the specificity of anti-blackness. But that's not impacted in terms of his means of solving this impact. Same as on the other flow. So you need an argument that says that why borderlands will not solve for anti-blackness, and he has said that we would break down black-white dichotomies. Again, not a lot of debate here from the 2 and R. But I end up thinking that the aff will outweigh on a strict impact calc because he has said that he can solve for both ableism and anti-blackness, but I think neither of the alternatives can do that in addition to solving for the case. You don't have a good alt-solves case argument on either of these flows, so the aff's ability to solve for all 3 things, even if there are these tiny link arguments that may be linked to the aff, is going to outweigh. And I can probably solve for other types of oppression too, but that's a kind of abstraction that's not really explained by the aff either.
Just what did you think of the Smith evidence that was extended?
Yeah, I think the aff I think his answer to this is pretty good. He's like, this evidence assumes a binary between indigeneity and Europe, but obviously that is not responsive to the aff because there's this borderland between that, and we should reject the discussion of that binary to begin with.
Where was that extension in the 2AR?
It was on T.
Oh, okay, that's fair.
Yeah. And other than that, I mean, I also think that you're pretty short on this. You're like, oh, aff will continue colonization of indigenous people.
Sure. What do you think the 2 and
So,
R should have been?
2 and R should go for one of the 2 Ks, and you should really punish him for doing this. You should explain how each alt links to the other. If it's really bad to distract from the specificity of anti-blackness, and obviously the dismodernism alt is really bad. If autonomy, so these are things that you should point out given what he's doing in this debate. And really, 2AR just looks like copy and pasted 1AR. You got to account for what he's doing. I think that 2 and R needed to go for one of the 2, or just your
T.
framework T argument. And you got to read cards that actually talk about the aff. I mean, that's kind of I don't want to come into the round with that sort of threshold, but when he has arguments for this is exactly what they want, which I looked at the cards and I don't think they're great, but at least it's evidence of what they want. And you're just like, no, but I saw these people in the streets of LA that want living wage. Like, that's not going to cut it.
Yeah.
Collapsing, and that would leave you way more time to explain things like alt-solves case, why you outweigh all this in the 2 and R.
Okay.
First comment to Jonas. The beginning of the 2 and R, I am smacking him on substance. It's troubling. In a world where we're talking about ableism, in a world where we're critiquing several things, indicating that you may engage in violence against your opponent, be it, clearly it's not real, because I don't think you're going to walk over and do that, but when if the 2AR is then, you shouldn't threaten to smack your opponent, vote ass, I'm done. And I'm not the I think that I probably have a higher threshold than most on issues along those lines, but in a world where I think the 1AR is kind of spread out anyway, that doesn't help you, and that sets up the 2AR doing that, and then you got nothing, right, it seems to me. I see things fairly similar involved in many areas. There are a couple things that I obviously respectfully disagree with. The first is, I do think the dualism argument, as articulated by the app, isn't handled very well on point by the negative. I don't see Smith, I do see the answers in the 1AR. I don't see the answers in the 2AR really. And the way I understand the evidence is that it talks about the nature of mestizo consciousness is an identity that is relegated to a primitive past. It is an appropriation of native identity. It equals the same kind of dualism that is discussed. So I don't really know what to do with that, because I think that it's probably true that dualism is conceded, in one way, but at the same time, this seems to be somewhat of an embedded answer to that. The other question extended into 2AR, one of 2 or 3 I'll talk about is Salazar. We ought to be good educators, we've got to listen to all points of view, got it. It's a question then as to whether or not I think that listening in a way that Salazar says means, what then ought we do? Want to talk a little bit about Freire, because that was discussed quite a bit in the last critique, and I think that makes a lot of sense. 2 or 3 things I see on Freire. One is not just about fairness and education, but it's also about a better method to help folks who are in the borderlands. I think my decision certainly is more difficult if the 1AR and the 2AR would be, here are examples of medical autonomous decisions people in the borderland want to make, because then I can link back your advocacy somehow to the topic. The way I hear it, though, is they need to be part of the discussion. I think that the next line or two in the explanation is needed for me, and I don't think there is really much of an answer to that by the end. So I think there are two ways to vote negative. The first is on T. I don't think you meet your counter-interpretation. I think that Jonas is pretty good in saying, he's not saying metaphor is bad. There are two parts to it. One, I'm not saying metaphor is bad. I'm saying that the metaphor has to be something related to medical decisions, you know, and I think he said cutting off the tongue is an example of a medical decision. I didn't hear really any answer to that in the 1AR or the 2AR, so, well, the 2AR didn't answer, I don't think, at all. You don't meet your counter-interpretation. If I think that the error is not just about fairness and education, but also ways to help folks in the borderland, the legalism argument seems to make some sense. The question might be, well, does he have an example of, you know, how we've asked folks in the borderland about whether they want it? No, not really, but I mean, at the same time, it's about that, but it is also about norm setting as well, which I don't think there's an answer to in the 1AR or the 2AR. And I think that complicates voting on that argument. The other thing I think is secondarily on the next issue, you're behind on the dismodernism argument. You know, I think the way I understand the argument is a simple kind of impact turn of metaphor is bad, and here's the reason why. And I think you have to do, at least for me, a little more work in explaining why that's not true. I agree with Bob that there are only a couple answers here. I'm not real sure why the perm resolves that in any way. And I do think there are two cards that are extended. Sievers, I believe, is one that talks about it being the root of all oppression. The other, I believe, is Davis, and he talks about also on a more technical level that there shouldn't be any real cross applications made in the 2AR. So I have a pretty high standard there, you know, unless you answer that argument. So at the end of the day, I think it's possible to vote on T, and also the metaphor is bad argument. I don't think we need to get to the, you know, anti-blackness argument. I think the debate is easier for me to resolve for the F if you, A, explain how you meet the counter-interpretation on T, and B, work a little harder to explain why free air and the nature of the borderlands and the inclusion of the oppressed is so important that none of the negative arguments seem to matter in any way, shape, or form. Because by the end of the debate, it seems to me like, well, none of his arguments apply because we didn't ask. And we don't know what that looks like. We don't know how to, you know, you may not know how to engage with that, but, you know, I think this is resolved far easier for me if you say, here are examples of medical autonomous decisions that people in the borderland want, for example, and that's in the 1AR, probably the 1AC, which I think it is kind of, but also more importantly, the 1AR and the 2AR, and I don't really hear it that way in this debate, and I heard it really well in the other debates that I did.
Do you think that would have been resolved if he is better on answering the question of whether he meets his own counter-interp?
Yes.
Okay. So in other words,
there has to be an
able to say,
explicit
like,
answer to when there are like two answers really on T. One is free air, the other is counter-interp, I get a metaphor.
Yeah.
And the 2NR is, yeah, you get a metaphor, but it needs to be one that's about an autonomous medical decision.
Right.
And
So
you
if
don't
you-
meet that.
right, so
So
if
then
you-
the whole debate then is about does free air take out T or no?
Right.
And if I think that it doesn't, then that creates a problem.
So do you think
yes.
that-
Do you mind if like Steve speaks and then we,
Sure.
because we have 25 minutes and I would like to talk to him before the next round of it. Let's go. And then you can ask questions.
I'll be brief.
Cool. Yeah.
So I agree largely with Mr. Timmons on topicality. I'm pulling the trigger on there's a topical version of the app. I think that there's no reason why a metaphor cannot include discussion of policy. All of the evidence that you're giving me and that I'm reading and is extended, like it's just not clear to me what the voice of the oppressed wants, right? Neither of you are really having that discussion. I think that's problematic. The evidence, the Franquise evidence that you're extending, seems to me like just to say that we should include the standpoint of these students specifically, and I don't understand where that's extended in the 2AR or even the 1AR where metaphor is the only way that we can include the voices of the oppressed. So that's the first thing you have to win. But the second thing you have to win is that metaphor precludes the possibility of having some sort of concrete policy medical decision that you defend. And at that point, that combined with the counterinterpretation argument that Mr. Timmons discussed, I think is sufficient for me to pull the trigger on Topicality.
So maybe this has to do with some idiosyncrasy in terms of how this was leveraged around, but why would he have to win that the metaphor is a method of including, as opposed to the metaphor controls what the topic is about, and then the topic becomes a question of whether adolescents should have autonomy over their language, and that being the thing that is offense.
And this is not the way that it's framed, I don't think, in the
I
round.
don't think they should have autonomy over their language, but the language of which they have autonomy over needs to be related to the medical